Never before have we been faced with so many choices about how we should think, act, and live. How should we spend our time, our resources, and our money?
Blessed are the pure in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
How do we view ourselves and those around us?
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
How can we find true success and lasting happiness?
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land.
How can we know what is right and true?
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
How can we make sense of suffering and loss?
Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
And those of us who want to continue with Jesus need to choose him and choose each other in a deeper way.
Welcome to the choices we face.
Hi, I'm Ralph Martin, and welcome to another week of The Choices We Face. Peter Herbeck's here as our co-host. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Ralph.
And we have a very special guest here today. Our guest today is Denis Dillon, who's the district attorney for Nassau County, Long Island, New York, one of the biggest population centers near New York City. And Denis has been the district attorney for 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah, really amazing. And he's a dedicated Catholic man who has not compromised his integrity or his beliefs and has been very amazingly successful politically. And he has quite a resume. I was inspired just reading what you've done in your life, Denis. It's just really amazing. Let me tell people a little bit before you deny it.
Okay.
He was a Fordham Law School grad, a New York police officer in the Air Force, working in the Justice Department under Robert Kennedy, working on some of the civil rights cases down in Alabama and Mississippi, heading up organized crime task force and having great success there, and being a pro-life Catholic at the same time. Certain times when he was running for election, he was so popular that the Democrats, the Republicans, the Conservatives, the Right to Life Party, and other minor parties would support him all together. He'd be running for all those parties. And then he ran into a crisis, which we'll let you tell us about, when the Democratic Party took a stand where they said abortion is a God-given right, and Denis couldn't go along with that. But that's down the road a little bit. Denis, tell us a little bit about how you got to be such a committed Catholic man.
Well, it took a while. Excuse me. I had a good Catholic education. I went to parochial school in the South Bronx. I was taught by the nuns and the brothers, and I went on to Catholic high school, and the brothers taught us. So I went on to Fordham when Fordham was when the Jesuits were really strong. At that time. I think they're different now to a certain extent. But so I had a very good formation, but I got away from it. I became, during the years that I was, I guess, in Mississippi, and when I worked as an assistant U.S. attorney and I worked with the strike force, I was what I would call, people talk about lukewarm Catholics. I might even have been described as a cold Catholic. I went to Mass on Sundays, but I wasn't really into it that much, and there were times when I know on Sunday I'd hope everybody would forget it was Sunday as 5 o'clock approached and it was the last time to go to Mass because I wanted to do other things. And I guess what brought me back was my daughter, Alice Marie. She became very interested in the charismatic renewal when she was in high school. She was going to a Catholic high school. And one day I was just lying around on a couch on a Saturday morning, and she came down rather early and was going out the door, and I said, "Where are you going?" And she said, "I'm going to a prayer meeting." I said, "Why are you going to a prayer meeting?" Okay, I got to hear more about this. So anyway, I talked to her when she got back, and she told me how interested she was. And then she started asking me to take her to charismatic masses and to other charismatic gatherings. And if I had sons, I'd be taking them to football games and so on. So I figured I have a daughter, let me take her to where she wants to go. And I started doing that. I used to say to my driver, when I'd see him on a Monday after we'd gone to a charismatic mass, say on a Friday evening, I'd say, "You wouldn't believe what I saw. I saw these people standing up and prophesying, and they would get so involved in this, relating this prophecy. I thought they'd never make their way out of it, but they always seemed to do it with proper syntax." And I said, "It's the most amazing thing in the world." And and there were healings and so on. But I think the thing that really got me was there came a point in 1980 when there was a big charismatic gathering at the Comac Arena in Suffolk County, which is the adjoining county to the east of us. And there were a lot of people there, including the Catholic bishop of the Diocese of Rockville Centre, which encompasses all of Long Island. And it was ecumenical. I remember Paul Anderson, the famous weightlifter, was there, and there were 6,000 people in attendance. I went with my daughter, and shortly after we arrived, my daughter kind of ran off and went with her friends, and I was sitting there just watching what was going on. At one point, they asked a woman to come up on the stage, and she was a housewife from East Meadow, and her name was Virginia D'Ambra. And they said that she had a healing gift, but that she also could see the people in her mind's eye before she got there who were going to be called out to be healed. So she started calling people out. Some people came up and some didn't. At one point, she turned around to people who were in wheelchairs and she said, if any of you feel that, that the Holy Spirit is calling you to stand up and walk, and stand up and walk. So she went on to what she was doing, and then all of a sudden there was like a bustle of activity around the wheelchairs, and I saw Bishop McGann jump up and look, and this person just got up out of the wheelchair and walked out.
Wow.
And I said, oh my God, look at this, you know? Why does God do these things? He must do it to bring people back to Him, to increase their faith, you know? And I said, I think I'm going to start to live differently.
Wow.
So at that point, the strange thing that happened was there were two people that I knew were charismatics from my village, Rockville Centre, and I had been kind of avoiding them in the past, but but they were making their way towards me. It was a man and his wife, and I couldn't get away. The crowd now was standing up, and they were pressed very close together, and they got to me, and the man put his hands on me, and the woman put her hands on the man, and they both started praying in tongues. And a change came over me that was palpable. Mm. And I tell people immediately, I wanted to go to prayer meetings. When I went to masses, the mass just was much more meaningful to me. I wanted to read the Bible, and the Bible was much more meaningful to me. And that was the beginning, you know. But it was a journey. You know, I've learned later, you know, from spiritual directors that it's an inclined plane, you know, and you slip and you go and slip, and you got to be continually making progress. So that's where I am now.
That's so great, Dennis. Really, just really wonderful to see how God reaches out to people in so many different ways. Now, how'd you get involved in politics? I mean, I know it's not exactly politics, but you do have to run for office. Is that right?
No, it's politics. I was heading up a strike force in the Eastern District of New York, which comprised at that time Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and all of Long Island. And I was investigating and prosecuting organized crime in all of that area for the federal government. I'd gotten a lot of publicity. And I was thinking of leaving and maybe going into private practice. A friend of mine who was a Democrat from Nassau County, I had just moved into Nassau County, came to me and he said, you know, we think we'd like to run you for district attorney. And I said, all right. I said, I'll think about it. I said, tell me about the job. He said, it pays $35,000 a year and they give you a car. I said, well, I'm very interested. Then he said, well, you're not my first choice. He said, my first choice is Joe Hoey, who was the United States Attorney, who had been my boss in the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I said, well, I'm very loyal to Joe, so I'm not going to compete with him. So if Joe decides not to take the job, come back to me. So Joe did, and then Joe himself took me to meet the Democrat leader, and the Democrat leader wanted me to be the candidate. But there was resistance within the Democrat Party itself because I was a Bronx Irish Catholic, and they suspected me. They had just gone through the whole abortion battles, and Roe v. Wade had been decided in their favor just the year previously, and they didn't want anybody upsetting the apple cart. So I had to win the nomination in the party, and I sort of allayed their fears. And I was sincere about it. I said, I don't know, as a district attorney, I can do anything to upset your apple cart. the United States Supreme Court has made a decision. I'm the district attorney. I'll follow the law. And one fellow did say to me, he said, you know, we don't even want to start you down your career road if you don't agree with us on that one issue.
Wow.
And he was a what we call an executive leader. They call them zone leaders in the Democrat Party. And he said, what would you do if you were a senator and you were in the Senate now with the Buckley Amendment? The Buckley Amendment was a very pro-life amendment. I said I'd vote for it. And when I went to the convention, he had signs all over the convention hall that Denis Dillon would vote for the Buckley Amendment and all this, you know.
Isn't that something?
So it was left up.
So that was already an issue right at the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Was that 74?
They had been putting a lot of pressure on me once I got involved to come out and say I'm pro-abortion. They wanted to change my position. I said I wouldn't do it. So when I got to the hall, Stanley Harwood, the Democrat leader, was a very good guy, and he wanted to get a candidate who was going to win. He said...
That was even more important than being pro-abortion, huh, winning.
Well, he actually accepted my position that he didn't think I could do anything about it either.
Yeah.
And so I was running against a very liberal attorney who was a civil rights activist. And the liberals in the Five Towns, which is a very Jewish area, was supporting him up to that point. So Stanley said to me, you guys are going to have to give a speech. So I gave this very first speech, which isn't always good. A lawyer likes to have the last word. But when I started talking, and what I said, I can still remember it to this day. They told me it was a great stump speech. I said, you know, I didn't make my reputation handling esoteric questions of constitutional law in air-conditioned courtrooms on Long Island. I said, I walked the hot, dusty roads of Mississippi with the Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizens Council dogging my heels. You know. And then I mentioned some of the people I had worked with in Mississippi and Alabama and so on. And you couldn't hear a pin drop. And when I stopped, I remember walking off the stage, and my opponent was trying to get the people to listen to them. There was just a buzzing all over, and they wouldn't listen to him.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that something?
This will give the wrong impression, but it was the kind of guy I was at the time, I guess. In my mind's eye, I could see myself taking a razor and cutting his throat, and he was bleeding all over the stage. But anyway, I got the nomination.
Those images probably came into your mind through your work with organized crime.
Right.
I'm sure. Anyway, I won the election primarily, I think, because of Watergate. The Republican voters stayed home at that time, and my opponent got in trouble for taking too many trips outside the county, and there was some hints that he might have been double billing. And although it didn't come up, I couldn't make the allegation during the campaign. After the campaign, he was convicted of double billing and went to federal prison. So I've been in ever since.
What are some of the highlights of these 30 years that you've been district attorney in such an important area of the country?
Well, you know, we have a lot of cases. I mean, major cases that we handle, and I could mention.
How many assistant district attorneys do you have?
I had 175 up until about a year ago. We're down to about 155 now.
That's a huge office.
The counties had financial problems.
Yeah.
But what I'm most proud about in the office is that it was a very political office. People were hired through the political process, and they were all political committee people. And they weren't the best lawyers that one could find. They had an overall conviction rate of about 74%, felony conviction rate. And
That's
cases...
very good, isn't it?
Well, my opponents claimed it was good.
Oh, yeah.
The cases just moved very slowly through the system. There was no... there was no real plan as to how to handle them expeditiously. So one of the things I brought about was I made the office completely non-political, and we raised the conviction rate, the felony conviction rate. Now it's generally always around 99%.
Wow.
You don't lose, basically.
No, we
Wow.
don't basically lose very often.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we moved the cases more swiftly through the system than any major office in the state of New York.
Wow.
It's a system that myself and some of the people who came in with me worked out,
Wow.
whereby we only offer reduced plea if the defense attorney pleads right away, up front. If he doesn't, he has to take a plea to the major count in the indictment, which is the one that carries the maximum punishment.
Wow.
And so there's a great incentive for them to plead out early. So that's one thing I'm very proud of. The other thing I'm proud of is our Rising Star program. And that's where we take the money that we get from our investigations, mostly of drug dealers, all the fruits and instrumentalities of crimes that we get the money through forfeiture. I'm allowed to use some of that for purposes other than law enforcement. And about 5 years ago, I started addressing some of the problems in an area we call the zone. We have a very affluent county. And that's the reason our crime rate is very, very low. We have the lowest crime rate in the country for any county of 1 million or more people. It's not because of me, I hasten to add. We did a study, and the study indicated that we have an affluent county, and affluent people don't go out and commit what we call index crimes. They might commit other crimes on Wall Street or whatever, but they don't commit the kind of index crimes that we count in the crime rate. They don't go out and do robberies, muggings, and so on. So that keeps our crime rate down. We have a very elderly population, and they don't go out and commit crimes. And what surprised me when the study was done, they're not often the victims of crimes. So that keeps the crime rate down also. We don't have a lot of young people, or hadn't until recently. That kept the crime rate down. So, but we do have a very, very poor population in the center of the county, and it's getting larger now. There were a lot of black people who didn't have jobs, and a lot of them were addicted to drugs, and the young people were being raised, they weren't being raised, they were just growing up on the streets. Now we have a large influx of Hispanics who have, a lot of them are illegal, who have a difficult time getting employment, and those kids are finding it very difficult to adjust. So I'm giving the money now. I started out giving it to activists in those areas who would work with those kids and had successful programs. I would give them money to keep them going. And then I decided to maybe start boxing clubs, because these kids on the street, there's a tendency toward violence and so on. And I thought if I could get them into boxing, they would work out their aggressive tendencies, and they would also get respect on the street, and they could bond with the other kids in the boxing program. I would get them jackets, and they would have respect as being fighters. So I did that, and we have now about 5 boxing clubs that we started and are supporting with our money. And last year, we had more Golden Gloves champions than any, in our Hempstead Club had more Golden Gloves champions than any club in the greater New York area.
Great.
Yeah,
But Dennis,
they are turning around, the kids too,
I know at one point all the political parties were supporting you, but then you had to make a break. What happened?
Well, what happened was that, that was around 1985, that it started. I was trying, after I came out with, I don't think I talked about it here, but I did come out at one point with a report that was very pro-life. It had to do with a baby that was aborted but delivered live. And it lived for a fairly prolonged time and was treated in the hospital. And it brought out a very barbaric nature of legal abortion. When that happened, I realized I would have something as DA, to do with abortion, because I was called upon to investigate that. The people claimed it was illegal, it was an illegal abortion, and that the baby was left to die alone. I found out in the investigation it was legal, and the baby wasn't left to die alone. The baby was treated, and the doctor stayed with the baby for a prolonged period of time until it finally died in the intensive care unit. So we issued a report, and I said at the end of that, I said, this shows the barbaric nature of even legal abortion, and that I am pro-life. I'm going to do something about it if I can. So I went to the Right to Life party when it was formed, and they eventually accepted me. They were a little bit wary in the beginning, but then they didn't want to use me. They said, we want to protect you. We don't want to get you in trouble. You can speak out about it, once in a while. So that's not what I wanted. So in 1985, I was invited to give a talk to a pro-life club up at Hofstra University. And when I went up there, there were only 6 kids in the classroom. And they were very apologetic, and they said, well, we're a club, but we thought we'd get some other people to come, you know, but it's just the 6 of us. So they said, can we wait a few minutes to see if anybody else comes? I said, sure, we'll wait. At that point, some older people came in, and they said, what is this? We're here, you know, here to talk. And I said, well, we're the pro-life club. Mr. Dillon's going to talk about pro-life. So one of the adults said to the kids, we know the kind of people you are. You don't care about life after it's born. You only care about life before it's born. So I said to the man, I said, how do you know what kind of kids these are? You never met them before now. You know, so the student said, don't worry about him, Mr. Dillon. We hear that all the time. Well, in any event, it was me now talking to the 6 kids. That's the way it turned out. And after my talk, and they were very knowledgeable, much more knowledgeable than I was at the time, they took me aside and they said, look, we demonstrate outside Bill Baird's abortion clinic in Hempstead. Bill Baird was a very well-known abortionist and advocate of abortion. And would you come and lead us? So I kind of fended them off. You know, it's kind of like, don't call me, I'll call you.
Yeah.
And we left it like that. And I went home. And then I started thinking, what's wrong with you? You're not afraid to demonstrate. You demonstrate on behalf of Jewish people who can't leave the Soviet Union. You demonstrate on behalf of the Irish causes. You picket the Black Watch when they come here. What's wrong with you? And I figure, well, you know, there aren't any communists in Nassau County too much. They're going to object, you know, to what I do with the Jewish people. And there aren't any British loyalists too much that are going to object. There are a lot of Irish. They like what I'm doing. And then I realized, hey, this is political. You know, you're just political coward. You know, you don't want to do the hard thing. So I just about made up my mind to do it when a fellow named Ray Murphy called from the Long Island Coalition for Life, and he said, you know, the kids told me you had accepted this, which I hadn't. So I said, no, Ray, I didn't, but I said I am going to do it because I realize now.
So you agreed to demonstrate outside of an abortion clinic even though you were the district attorney?
Yeah, and we advertised very heavily. The Long Island Coalition of Life got behind it, and we got about 700 people to go with us, and it created a tremendous amount of publicity. And then I did it, Newsday, which is the major newspaper in our area, was so upset about it, and they made such threats about my political future and everything. I decided, well, I'm not going to let them think they frightened me, so we're going to do it again. So we did it again. We got 1,500 people.
Wow, wow.
And then Bishop McGann decided he would do it. And then I joined him as just one of the people that happened to be there. He got 3,000 people. Wow. You know, and that's really galvanized the pro-life movement, which had always been strong on Long Island, but after Roe v. Wade, it tended to kind of fall off a little bit.
And I know from reading, you know, some of your speeches that you refused to prosecute Operation Rescue People.
Right.
You encouraged police officers to negotiate in their union contracts a conscience clause so that they wouldn't have to arrest people who are trying to prevent babies being killed. I mean, you were taking such strong, courageous stands, and you kept getting elected year after year after year.
Right. Well, I don't think the people, at least the people I'm familiar with, I mean, in our county, even though they disagree with me, they'll vote for me. They like a politician to take strong stands.
Wow.
What they don't like is if you waffle.
Yeah. You know, what I see, Dennis, is that I teach at the seminary, and we teach the documents of Vatican II and the role of lay people in the world, and you're embodying what the Vatican Council hoped Catholic lay people would do in the world, really stand up for their convictions and use wisdom and use courage to do what's possible. And you've done that in an amazing way, and you really embody the kind of lay Catholic involvement in the world that the whole church is hoping for.
Well, I try to do that. I agree with you. I think that's what lay people are called to do, is to Christianize the world. And the priests and bishops are called to teach us the moral principles we should apply. What I don't like, the bishops and priests sometimes telling us how to apply those moral principles. I think they're off the reservation when they do that, and I think it just creates a lot of confusion.
Now, in terms of when the numbers were mobilized behind you at those pickets and protests, do you think that that represents the fact that there's actually a large majority of people who disagree with abortion and so when they have the right kind of leadership, they'll come out? Is that part of the issue, or what do you think? What's
Well,
your
that was
sense?
certainly true in Nassau County.
We only have
that's
about
what
a
I
minute,
found.
so-
I found it was very true in Nassau County. In fact, at one point, when they made their strongest effort to rid themselves of me, they ran a former assistant in my office against me. And in addition to his getting the Democrat nomination and a Liberal Party nomination, they also formed a new party called the Pro-Abortion Party, I think is
Pro-Choice Party.
Pro-Choice
yeah.
Party, yes. And I, by that time, had the Right to Life Party endorsement. And so they really brought out major figures from Hollywood. Colleen Dewhurst came out, and they thought they would beat me, and they said this is going to resound throughout the country. But they lost. They lost by a significant number. And then after that, they haven't made any really strong effort.
Dennis, we're going to have to stop.
Okay.
But thank you so much for 30 years of faithful witness to the Lord and being a leaven in society. And just thank you for your life as a layman in the church today. We here at Renewal Ministries want to do anything we can to help you be the same kind of leaven, the same kind of witness. I've written a booklet called What Happens When I Die, and we'd like to make it available to you at no cost, just for the asking. Call the 800 number, write to the address, access our website, and we'll send it right to you. Until next week, this is Ralph Martin and Denis Dillon and Peter Herbeck wishing you the very best. A life of faithful witness to Jesus Christ every day in the circumstances of our lives. Life is short, and the years fly by with increasing speed. Life is fragile, and the fate of all human flesh is death. At some point, we all ask, what happens when I die? Is there life after death? What will it be like? How does what I do in this life affect what happens when I die? My booklet provides some answers to these important questions by reflecting on what Scripture and the Church say about what happens when I die. To receive this free booklet, call Renewal Ministries at 1-800-282-4789 or visit us on the web at renewalministries.net.
Are you searching for ways to grow in prayer and holiness, in reading and sharing the good news, and in living as a disciple of Christ? Do you want to be challenged, encouraged, and strengthened in living out your faith daily? Then join us this summer at the Renewal Ministries Institute. The schools of the Renewal Ministries Institute are an answer to the Holy Father's call for all Christians to participate in a new evangelization. Noted biblical scholars and lay missionaries join the Renewal Ministries staff to provide dynamic, orthodox teachings that will re-energize your faith. Daily participation in the sacraments, worship, prayer ministry, adoration, and fellowship with Catholics from around the world will revive and deepen your commitment to the Church's mission. Call 734-662-1730 today or visit us on the web at renewalministries.net to find out more about the Renewal Ministries Institute.